Imagine trying to find a single word that describes the teachings of the Buddha, the literal physics of a moving atom, and, well, the reason a bee makes honey.
Right, yeah. You really can't do it in English.
No, you can't. You can't do it in most languages, honestly. But ancient India actually had one.
It is the absolute definition of a translator's nightmare. I mean, we try to box things in,
Yeah, totally.
We like to point to a dictionary and find the exact equivalent, but with this concept, the dictionary just completely falls apart.
Welcome to today's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
If you're listening to this, you've probably heard the word tossed around at some point. Maybe you caught it in a yoga class, or maybe you were reading up on Eastern history. The word is Dharma.
Yes, Dharma. And translators over the centuries have tried so desperately to pin it down.
Oh, they've thrown every term at the wall, like law, duty, justice, religion, righteousness.
And none of them actually capture it. Not even close.
Really?
Yeah.
None of them.
No, because every single one of those English words represents just a tiny fragment. It's like trying to describe an entire ocean by talking about a single drop of water.
Oh, yeah.
You can combine all those Western concepts together and you still miss the underlying architecture of what Dharma really is.
So our mission today is to decode this massive pan-Indian concept for you. We are going to explore how one single philosophical idea evolved to influence billions of people across, multiple completely distinct spiritual traditions.
It's a huge journey.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how Dharma might actually apply to how you live your life on a random Tuesday, we have to travel back to the creation of the cosmos.
Which is a pretty big leap.
Right. Where do we even start with a word this heavy?
Well, I think the best place to start is the literal root of the word itself. Dharma comes from the ancient Sanskrit root DHR.
DHR, and what does that mean?
That root simply means to hold or to sustain.
To hold, okay.
Interestingly enough, it shares a linguistic ancestor with the Latin word firmus.
Oh, which is where we get the English word firm, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's about foundation.
Got it. So at its most foundational level, Dharma is the law that sustains things.
Right. It is the invisible scaffolding that keeps the universe from collapsing back into absolute chaos.
And that chaos actually has a name too, right? Adharma?
Yes, adharma. If dharma is what holds the fabric of the universe together, adharma is the unraveling of those threads.
What I found incredible while preparing for this was realizing just how early this concept became an international export. Like, it wasn't just kept in a philosophical silo in India.
Oh, not at all.
There's this fascinating historical anchor from 258 BCE. The Mauryan Emperor Ashoka had this concept carved into a rock inscription in Afghanistan.
Which is such a brilliant piece of history.
Yeah, and it's a bilingual rock meant for a diverse population. But he didn't just use the standard Greek word for law or rules, did he?
He didn't know. And his translation choices are incredibly revealing. I mean, if Ashoka just meant the legal rules of the empire, he would have used the Greek word nomos.
Right, like normal laws.
Exactly. But instead, he used the Greek word eusbeia.
Which means what exactly?
It translates roughly to piety or spiritual maturity. Specifically, it involves a deep reverence for the human community and the gods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and on the Aramaic side of that same rock, he used the word ki, which translates to absolute truth or rectitude.
So he's intentionally blending this idea of community devotion with universal, undeniable truth.
Exactly.
I kept trying to visualize this, and the best analogy I could come up with is comparing Dharma to the laws of physics, but fused with a moral compass.
I like that.
Yeah, it's like gravity. If gravity also cared whether you were a good neighbor.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that we can take that gravity analogy a step further. Think about what happens if you try to ignore gravity.
I mean, you can't. You just fall.
Right. You simply fall and hurt yourself. Ashoka's translation is trying to communicate that Dharma isn't just a list of commandments handed down from a king or a deity that you should follow.
It's not optional.
No, it is the fundamental fabric of reality. Revering your community isn't just nice. It is in alignment with the very structure of the universe. Being a bad neighbor is like trying to step off a cliff and expecting to float.
Wow. But how did we get from a cosmic law of gravity to a practical human guide for behavior?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because if you look at the oldest Vedic literature, like the Rig Veda, Dharma was hyper-literal. Like, it wasn't a metaphor at all.
No, not in the beginning.
It originally referred to the literal physical prods and poles that the ancient deities supposedly used to hold the sky away from the earth.
Right, so it starts as a mythological, physical, stabilizing force. The gods are literally delivering physical order from physical disorder.
Right.
But over millennia, that physical imagery matures. It becomes an ethical and social concept. It links up with another ancient concept called Raita.
Raita being the cosmic order.
Correct. Raita is the truth that coordinates the operation of the sun, the moon, and the seasons. And Raita is understood to be in a constant state of war against Maya.
Right, Maya. Illusion, deception, the fraud that creates disorder.
Exactly.
So Dharma essentially becomes the weapon we use to fight off Maya. And this brings us to the great epics of Hinduism, where this massive cosmic battle between order and chaos suddenly gets intensely human.
The epics are where Dharma stops being an abstract theory and gets its hands dirty, honestly.
Yeah, and I want to dive into this because there's a specific story from the Mahabharata epic that completely threw me. It challenged everything we've talked about so far regarding rules.
Oh. Which story are you looking at?
The end of Yudhishthira's life. He's the great hero of the epic, and he is making this grueling final trek up a snowy mountain to reach the gates of paradise.
Ah, yes. The famous ascent.
Right. Everyone else has fallen away, and his only remaining companion is this stray dog that started following him. When he finally reaches the summit, he is met by Yama, who is literally the divine personification of Dharma.
Right.
And Yama tells him, "You have earned paradise. Step inside, but the dog has to stay out."
It is the ultimate test of piety. Because a strict, literal interpretation of cosmic law would say an unclean animal has no place in the divine realm of the gods. The rules are the rules.
But Yudhishthira refuses.
He does.
He tells a god, to his face, that he will not abandon this loyal companion. He'd rather give up eternal paradise than betray the dog. And Yama actually praises him for this, revealing it was a test all along.
It's a beautiful moment.
It is, but I have to push back here. If Dharma is a universal law like gravity, you can't just choose to ignore gravity because you feel bad for a dog.
That's a fair point.
Right. How is choosing compassion over a divine rule still Dharma? Doesn't that just mean the rules are fundamentally flawed?
That tension you're feeling is exactly the point of the epic. This is the crucial difference between Western concepts of absolute law and the Indian concept of Dharma.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the Mahabharata doesn't present Dharma as a strict binary where you simply check boxes on a divine legal form. It presents it as a complex contextual spectrum.
So it's not binary at all.
Not at all. In fact, the epic uses 3 symbolic approaches to highlight how messy human morality actually is, and it does this through 3 brothers.
Okay.
First, you have Bhima. His answer to any moral problem is brute force. He represents an egoistic, individualistic materialism. If there's an obstacle, smash it.
Pretty straightforward.
Exactly. Then you have Yudhishthira, the man with the dog. He represents deep piety, tradition, and strict adherence to social virtue.
But even he had to learn that blind adherence to tradition isn't enough, hence the dog test.
Precisely. Which brings us to the third brother, Arjuna. Arjuna is the focal point of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a key section of the Mahabharata.
Right, the Gita.
And Arjuna represents the introspective middle ground. He doesn't just smash things, and he doesn't just blindly follow tradition. He struggles. He questions his duties.
Yeah, he literally stops his chariot in the middle of a battlefield and has a total crisis of conscience.
Because his dharma as a warrior is telling him to fight, but his dhamma as a family member is telling him not to kill his own relatives who are on the opposing side.
Oh, wow. So 2 valid dharmas are in direct conflict.
Exactly. The text is showing us that dharma isn't a list you just memorize. It is an experiential inquiry. It requires you to constantly weigh your actions, your context, and your highest intent.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. There's an ancient text called the Apastamba Dharma Sutra that explicitly says dharma and adharma don't just walk around saying, that is us. You have to use your intellect and your compassion to figure it out in real time.
So if it's this deeply embedded cosmic law tied to these ancient deities and epic battles, what happens when a revolutionary thinker comes along?
Like who?
Well, a few centuries later, the Buddha emerges. And he fundamentally shifts the focus away from the cosmic gods and the old Vedic rituals. Does the concept of Dharma survive that kind of paradigm shift?
Oh, it doesn't just survive. It becomes the absolute center of the new paradigm.
Really?
Yeah. The Buddha retained the concept, calling it Dhamma in the Pali language, but he completely recalibrated its primary meaning.
How so?
In Buddhism, the Dhamma refers specifically to the teachings of the Buddha himself and the true ultimate nature of reality that those teachings point toward.
Oh, I see. When I was looking into the Theravada Buddhist tradition, they break the realization of Dhamma down into this highly pragmatic three-phase process.
Yes, the 3 phases.
You don't just get it all at once through some magical epiphany. First, there's pariyatti, which is learning the theory of the Dharma. You study the texts, you listen to the lectures.
But theory in Buddhism is famously insufficient. Knowing the recipe doesn't mean you've baked the cake.
True.
That brings us to the second phase, paripatti. Putting that theory into rigorous, daily, meditative practice.
I kept thinking of it like riding a bicycle. Pariyatti is reading a physics textbook on how a bicycle balances.
Sure.
You can memorize all the formulas, but the second you get on the bike, you're going to fall over. Paripatti is the grueling process of actually getting on the bike, falling down, getting back up, and training your body to find the balance. You have to experience the mechanism yourself.
That's a perfect way to look at it. And when you finally find that balance, when you combine the learning with the practice, you arrive at the third phase.
Which is Pativita.
Yes, Pativita. You penetrate the Dhamma, you realize the truth of it through direct, undeniable experience. The theory and the practice dissolve into actualized wisdom.
It's incredibly systematic.
Mm-hmm.
And we see similar structural adaptations in Sikhism, too, where the word pronounced dharam is heavily framed as the path of righteousness, focusing on proper religious practice and the active outward performance of your moral duties within your community.
Right. It adapts to the core philosophy of each tradition.
But here is where my brain genuinely short-circuited. We get to Jainism.
Ah, yes, the Jain interpretation is radically different.
I was reading along, nodding at moral duty and teachings, and suddenly the Jain texts introduced this term, Dharmastikaya.
Yes.
In Jain philosophy, existence is divided into 2 major categories, the soul and the non-soul. And within the non-soul category, Dharma isn't about being a good person. It's an ontological subcategory, meaning the literal, physical principle of motion.
It is a stunning pivot, isn't it? The metaphysics of Jainism take the term into a realm that sounds much closer to quantum mechanics than theology.
I really need you to explain this, because how does a concept that means compassion for a dog or moral duty become the physics of atomic movement?
It sounds totally disconnected.
It does. That feels like someone taking the concept of democracy and deciding it's also the reason water boils. How do those connect?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture to understand it, we have to go back to the root word DHR again.
To hold, to support, to sustain.
Exactly. In Jain teachings, the ultimate goal of any living being is to ford a passage across samsara, which is the endless, suffering-filled cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Now, think about a fish in a glass tank.
Okay, I'm with you. A fish.
The fish has fins, it has the physical capability and the desire to swim, but it cannot move a single inch without the water.
Right.
The water doesn't force the fish to swim, but it is the invisible, pervasive medium that makes motion entirely possible. In Jainism, Dharmastikaya is the water.
Whoa. Wait, really?
Yes. It is the invisible medium of the universe that allows a physical atom to move. And conceptually, it is linked to the principle that allows a soul to move toward liberation.
That is wild.
In a universe where absolutely everything is intertwined, physical reality and spiritual progression are not separate compartments. Dharma is the sustaining infrastructure of reality that makes any kind of progress, whether it's an atom vibrating or a human soul achieving enlightenment possible.
Okay, that is brilliant. We've gone from the pillars holding up the sky to cosmic gravity to the water in the universal fish tank.
It's quite a journey.
But let's bring this all the way back down to earth. Let's talk about your daily life. How does a person actually do their Dharma on a random Tuesday in traffic or at their job?
This is where Hindi texts get hyper-practical because they recognize that a one-size-fits-all morality usually fails.
Thank goodness.
Right. So they break Dharma down into various categories depending on exactly who you are and where you are in life.
Right. There is Sanatana Dharma, which are the eternal, unchanging universal principles, things everyone should strive for, like truthfulness and nonviolence.
Yes, the baseline.
But then there's Svadharma, which is your personal individual duty, and Varnasrama Dharma, which are duties based specifically on the stage of life you're currently in.
And this framework is a profound relief for human psychology, honestly.
How so?
It acknowledges that the moral obligations of a stay-at-home parent are fundamentally different from those of a frontline soldier, which are different from those of a 20-year-old student or a retired CEO. You don't have to carry the weight of the whole world. You just have to uphold your specific pillar.
There's an incredibly specific example from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras that tests this, and I want your take on it.
Oh, Patanjali, let's hear it.
Patanjali talks about the universal vow of non-injury, ahimsa, but he acknowledges real-world survival. He uses the example of a fisherman. If a person's dharma, their personal duty, livelihood, and the way they feed their family is to be a fisherman, they must injure a fish to survive.
It's an unavoidable reality of their existence within the food chain.
But wait, he's killing the fish. How does doing it with less trauma make it universally harmonious?
Yeah.
He's still ending a life.
Yeah.
Doesn't that violate the cosmic order?
Patanjali's synthesis here is highly pragmatic. He recognizes that living in a physical body inherently requires consumption. We step on insects when we walk, we consume resources to survive. You cannot escape the reality of your environment.
That's true.
But Patanjali says the fisherman must perform this duty with the least amount of trauma possible to the fish, and he must ensure he harms no other creatures in the process of his work.
Like collateral damage.
Exactly. He doesn't pollute the river, he doesn't overfish and starve the village downstream. You do your necessary messy duty, but you consciously minimize the chaos. You elevate how you perform the role you are in.
You maintain the order where you stand. I love that. But, diving into how society structures these roles brought up a deeply profound socioeconomic angle in our research.
It really did.
We usually talk about morality like it exists in a vacuum. Like it's just a personal choice you make in your head, regardless of your surroundings. But the ancient Shatapatha Brahmana text links Dharma directly to the environment and the economy.
Yes, it's very explicit about it.
It says that rain brings water, water brings agricultural wealth and prosperity, and that prosperity is what enables people to actually follow Dharma.
Because the material conditions of a society directly impact its moral capacity. It is very hard to focus on cosmic harmony when your children are starving.
Right. Which made me wonder, are they saying morality is just a luxury of the prosperous? Like, if I'm starving in a famine, do I get a pass on cosmic law? Does distress destroy our ability to be good?
This raises an important question, and it's a fantastic one to explore. The texts didn't view Dharma as a luxury exclusively for the rich, but they were brutally realistic.
What do you mean?
They recognized a vicious cycle. Unchecked distress inherently breeds dharma, immorality, crime, and chaos. Less moral life causes more societal distress, and rising distress causes more immoral life. A complete downward spiral.
So how do you stop the spiral?
This is where the concept of Rajadharma enters. The duty of rulers and governments.
Oh, the leaders step in.
The texts mandate that those in power have a fundamental dharma to prevent poverty and ensure economic stability. Not just to hoard wealth, but because prosperity is the environmental enabler for a moral society.
That makes total sense.
If a ruler allows drought, extreme inequality, and poverty to ravage the people, they are failing their Rajadharma. Why? Because they are forcing their citizens into a desperate position where following personal dharma becomes almost impossible. The ruler's cosmic duty is to maintain the garden so that the plants actually have the capacity to grow toward the light.
That is incredibly relevant today. So what does this all mean? We've covered thousands of years of thought, crossing Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, and Hinduism, translating a word that actively defies translation.
A lot of ground covered.
Distilling it all down, Dharma isn't just an ancient religious term to be studied in a university textbook. It is a lens. It is a highly practical framework for looking at how your personal actions hold up the social construct around you.
Absolutely.
It's the ultimate reminder of our absolute interconnectedness. Just as it is the Dharma of the sun to radiate heat and the Dharma of the river to flow, you have a specific, undeniable role to play in this cosmic concert.
And the most beautiful part of that framework is its adaptability, which leads to one final lingering concept from the text that I think is essential for you, the listener, to mull over today.
Ooh, what's that?
The sources mention something called Yuga Dharma.
Yuga Dharma. What's a yuga?
A yuga is an epoch, or a great age of humanity. And Yuga Dharma is a specific form of Dharma that is only valid for that particular age. When that age eventually concludes, the Yuga Dharma changes.
Wait, so the overarching rules of the cosmic concert actually shift to accommodate the new reality?
They do. The law itself evolves.
That is fascinating.
Which forces us to look at our own time right now. If we consider that we are currently entering a totally new era, an age of hyperconnectivity, of artificial intelligence, of unprecedented global and environmental shifts, we have to ask, what is the the new Yuga Dharma.
Yeah, what is the new law of gravity for our morality?
Exactly. If the fundamental rules of how we support each other and sustain our universe are changing right beneath our feet, what is your specific role in maintaining the balance as this new age shifts into focus?
It's like we are being handed that bilingual rock inscription from Ashoka all over again, and it's up to us to figure out how to translate the truth for a completely new world.
So right now, sitting in your bathroom, your daily anti-dandruff shampoo, your mint toothpaste, your moisturizer, and like the heavy grease-based white paint that a stage actor wears, they all share the exact same legal classification.
Yeah, it's a massive and, frankly, kind of counterintuitive regulatory umbrella.
Mhm.
I mean, when we hear the word cosmetics, we immediately picture a makeup bag.
Right.
But the reality is just far more sprawling than that.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a huge stack of information entirely sourced from a really comprehensive Wikipedia article on cosmetics.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to uncover the surprising history, the molecular science, and the staggering global impact behind the products that you apply to your body every single morning. Because honestly, the legal definition of cosmetics completely upends how we normally use that word.
It really does. Under United States law, specifically according to the FDA, a cosmetic is defined as basically anything intended to be applied to the human body for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or, altering the appearance.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sure. Because that definition means anything that just sits on the surface or cleans the surface
Yeah.
is a cosmetic. I mean, the source material notes one specific exception, which is pure soap.
Right, soap is its own legal thing.
But other than that, a daily deodorant or just a basic face wash is legally in the exact same category as, like, theatrical prosthetics.
Yeah, they all sit at this incredible intersection of chemistry, sociology, and global regulation. So whether you're using a subtle skin serum to hydrate your face or, applying full theatrical paint to perform under stage lights.
Which is intense.
It is. But you're participating in a chemical exchange that human beings have been evolving and refining for literally thousands of years.
And looking at how long we've been at this, the history is genuinely shocking. Like, we think of modern beauty standards as intense today, but the lengths people used to go to and the sheer toxicity of what they were willing to absorb, it's horrifying. It's a story of literal deadly vanity. Absolutely. If we trace it back, we see ancient Egyptians utilizing coal around their eyes, relying on castor oil as this sort of protective balm against the harsh environment.
That was functional, mostly.
Right. Early functional and aesthetic applications.
Yeah.
But the real shift into hazardous territory happens a bit later.
Yeah, right around the Renaissance in the 19th century in the West, there was this absolute global obsession with pale skin. And to achieve it, people were painting their faces with something called ceruse.
Yes.
And looking at the chemical makeup of ceruse, it is literally white lead.
It is straight lead.
And meanwhile, in Japan, they had a traditional white face powder called oshiroi, which was also produced using white lead.
And as you can imagine, the side effects of applying heavy metals directly to the face were catastrophic.
I can't even.
We're talking about severe swelling and inflammation of the eyes. Users' tooth enamel would weaken and just rot away entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and in severe cases, the skin would literally turn black from the prolonged lead poisoning. With heavy daily use, it was a known and documented cause of death.
Wait, okay, they had to have known it was making them sick, right? Why would an entire society willfully give themselves lead poisoning? It's like painting your face with toxic house paint every single day just to prove to people you don't have to work out in the sun.
Well, it comes down to pale skin being an incredibly powerful sociological marker at the time. If you were pale, it meant you possessed the wealth and ability to stay indoors.
Right.
Tan skin was an indicator of the working class who had to labor outside in the fields. So society equated that opaque white finish with high status.
Just to look rich.
Basically.
Yeah.
And functionally, lead mixed with vinegar absorbed really readily into the skin to create that exact finish. The status symbol just outweighed the health risk.
And it didn't even stop in the 19th century either. The source mentions a product in the 20th century, this mascara called Lash Lure, that actually caused users to go blind.
Yeah, the Lash Lure incident is infamous.
It is wild to think about people blinding themselves just for thicker eyelashes.
It wasn't really until scientific advances in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that these wildly hazardous substances started being pushed out of mainstream formulas, which in turn paved the way for the modern commercial boom.
Right. The 1910s seem to be the turning point. You have figures like Elizabeth Arden and Max Factor building these massive empires, taking cosmetics from these dangerous, unregulated home brews and transitioning them into a multi-billion-dollar standardized enterprise.
But as that enterprise grew, it became deeply intertwined with societal expectations of women, which led to a massive sociopolitical backlash.
The 1968 Miss America protest, right?
Exactly. By 1968, demonstrators threw cosmetics into what they called a freedom trash can.
The imagery of that is just so striking. They weren't just throwing away makeup. They were protesting these products as literal instruments of female torture. Why specifically cosmetics, though? Like, what was the core argument?
The underlying argument there was that cosmetics had transitioned from being an optional enhancement into a tool of enforced performative femininity.
Like a mandatory uniform.
Right. It was viewed as a uniform required for societal participation and professional acceptance. The protesters were rejecting the idea that a woman's natural face was somehow inherently unacceptable or unprofessional without chemical alteration.
That's a massive historical swing. I mean, going from a lethal indicator of aristocratic wealth to a booming commercial requirement to a symbol of oppression tossed into a trash can.
And today, the pendulum is swinging in yet another direction.
Yeah, the stigma around men wearing makeup is noticeably weakening, especially in places like the US. Brands are launching lines specifically targeting men to, conceal blemishes or enhance facial features.
We judge those 19th century aristocrats for poisoning themselves for status, but today's ultimate status symbol is clean beauty, which, ironically, has introduced an entirely new era of chemical complexity and potential danger.
Which forces us to ask, what exactly are we absorbing into our skin today? Let's get into the chemistry, because when I look at the label on a basic foundation or a moisturizer, the ingredient list is usually a mile long and completely unpronounceable. What is actually making up that paste?
Broadly speaking, cosmetics are constructed from two categories of chemical compounds: organic and inorganic. And here, organic just refers to carbon-based chemistry, not like farming practices.
Oh, okay.
The organic compounds are usually modified natural oils and fats that serve as the base or moisturizer. The inorganic compounds are processed minerals.
So the inorganic stuff is where we get the actual visual effects. Things like iron oxides to create different skin tone colors or zinc oxide. The source also mentions bismuth oxychloride.
Bismuth oxychloride is fascinating from a material science perspective. It is a nacreous mineral.
Meaning it looks like mother of pearl.
Exactly.
That froxed pearlescent shimmer in a highlighter palette. That's what we're looking at.
Precisely. When a product gives the skin a shining, illuminated appearance, you are usually observing the optical light scattering effects of that specific inorganic heavy metal compound.
But consumers are incredibly wary of heavy metals and harsh chemicals now. We are living through this massive clean cosmetics movement where everyone wants safer plant-based ingredients.
Oh, absolutely.
But here is the wild part of the source material. The FDA does not even have a regulatory definition for the word natural when it comes to cosmetics.
None at all. It is entirely a marketing void.
That's insane.
The FDA actually explicitly warns consumers that choosing ingredients from sources considered organic or natural is absolutely no guarantee of safety. I mean, poison ivy is natural after all.
That feels incredibly deceptive. If the very word natural means whatever a marketing department decides it means, how can a consumer actually navigate what is safe?
It highlights a significant gap between marketing buzzwords and chemical reality. And that gap becomes a genuine public health concern when we look at the intentional inclusion of microplastics and nanoplastics in these formulas.
Okay, let's talk about the plastics, because this blew my mind. They aren't just accidentally flaking off the packaging into the lotion. Manufacturers intentionally synthesize and add these tiny plastics directly into the formula.
Yes, they do.
They use them as an ingredient carrier or to make the texture feel silky or to give the skin that smooth, illuminated effect. It's like rubbing tiny, invisible plastic scrubbing bubbles into your face. But instead of washing down the drain, they just move into your cells.
And we have to consider the biological environment where these plastics are being applied.
Yeah.
You are putting them on the face, the hands, the scalp. These are areas of the human body that are highly humid.
Right.
They're covered in open hair follicles and active sweat glands.
So they aren't just sitting on top of the skin like a physical barrier.
No, they are entering the body. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, On a molecular level, these nanoplastics do not just passively float around. They actively disturb the communication pathways inside your cells.
Well,
They do this by binding to your proteins and altering their secondary or tertiary structures.
hold on, let's break that down for a second. What does changing a protein's structure actually mean for the cell in plain English?
Think of your cell's proteins like a perfectly cut metal key designed to fit into a very specific biological lock to trigger a function.
Okay.
A protein's secondary and tertiary structure is simply the 3D shape that the amino acid chain folds into the shape of the key.
Got it.
When a nanoplastic binds to that protein, it physically warps and bends the shape.
So the key no longer hits the lock. The cell's communication just shuts down or misfires.
Exactly. And when proteins change shape and stop functioning correctly, the biological consequences on the skin are severe.
Like what?
Well, this mechanism leads to chronic inflammation, the development of severe allergies, and most alarmingly, an increased risk of carcinogenesis, which is the formation of cancer.
That is terrifying, and the source material highlights a really disturbing demographic reality alongside this chemistry. Studies show that women of color are disproportionately exposed to these specific harmful ingredients.
Yes, it is a documented sociological trend. Certain beauty products, particularly hair relaxers, on specific skin-altering creams that contain these harsh chemicals and plastics, are heavily targeted toward women of color.
Which is just awful.
It is. This specialized marketing leads to a significantly higher rate of use, and therefore a much higher rate of chemical exposure within those communities.
Which means understanding the chemistry of a moisturizer isn't just a matter of personal health, it's a massive issue of environmental justice and public health.
It really is. But understanding the raw chemistry inside the bottle is only half of the equation. Because over the last few decades, the actual physical mechanics of how we apply these chemicals has evolved into an absolute science.
No, there is a massive arsenal of tools and techniques now. And the industry generally splits this arsenal into two main categories: skincare and decorative makeup.
Skincare functions as the preparatory phase. You're dealing with cleansers, which might utilize cleansing oils. The chemical principle there is like dissolves, like the oil in the cleanser binds to the natural sebum and oil-based makeup on your face to basically lift it away.
Then you have chemical exfoliants. The source lists AHAs and BHAs. Those stand for alpha hydroxy acids and beta hydroxy acids, things like glycolic or salicylic acid.
Right.
And instead of using a rough physical scrub that tears at the skin, these acids literally dissolve the microscopic glue holding dead skin cells together, allowing them to just wash away. Add in your serums, your moisturizers, and your SPF to block UV radiation, and you finally have your canvas ready.
And once the cellular canvas is prepped, the decorative application begins. Primers are used to create a completely smooth, non-porous layer. Concealers neutralize specific blemishes, and foundation creates a uniform skin tone.
And the techniques required to apply this are basically optical illusions. You have contouring, which uses darker matte shades to artificially add depth and shadow, emphasizing bone structure. And then highlighting, which applies those light-reflecting nacreous minerals we talked about to the high points of the face, like the cheekbones and the bridge of the nose. But what really gets me is the tools.
The specialized delivery systems.
Yes. I mean, a modern makeup bag looks like a master painter's kit or a mechanic's toolbox. You've got spoolies for the eyebrows. You've got kabuki brushes, stippling brushes, beauty blenders. Why do we need 20 different brushes just to put powder on a face?
Well, it's because every single tool is engineered for a specific physical property of the chemical compound it carries. The most fundamental difference is in the bristles. Makeup brushes are either synthetic or natural.
What's the practical difference between them? Like, why choose one over the other?
Synthetic brushes are made of man-made polymers, usually nylon or polyester. These fibers are completely non-porous. They do not absorb moisture.
Yeah.
Therefore, they are the perfect delivery mechanism for liquid and cream products like foundation. The liquid product simply glides off the synthetic fiber and transfers entirely onto the skin.
So if you used a natural hairbrush for a liquid foundation, the brush would just soak it all up like a sponge and waste the product.
Exactly. Natural animal hairbrushes have microscopic cuticles along the shaft, identical to human hair. Those cuticles create friction, which makes them ideal for gripping dry powders and blending them softly across the skin without dropping the pigment. It is a perfect example of form following chemical function.
That makes so much sense. And then the shapes of the brushes dictate the coverage. Like, A kabuki brush has a short stem and very dense packed bristles. It's designed to buff powder evenly over a large surface area,
Right.
whereas a stippling brush has these dual-length, soft, synthetic bristles that gently tap liquid onto the skin, giving you an airbrushed, light to medium coverage effect. And a spoolie is just that little wire spiral brush used to comb out brow hairs or apply mascara.
And this level of technical specialization powers a staggering global economy. I mean, these aren't just tools sitting on a bathroom vanity. They represent billions of dollars moving through a highly complex web of international legislation.
The numbers are astronomical. The source notes that back in 2005, the market volume for the US, Europe, and Japan alone was around 70 billion euros a year.
A massive industry.
And the growth in emerging markets like China is explosive. It was expected to hit $7.4 billion by 2021. And that is heavily driven by social media tutorials and shifting attitudes among younger demographics who are treating makeup application as a technical hobby.
With an industry operating at that massive global scale, the regulatory environments dictate how these chemical compounds move across international borders.
Yeah.
And the contrast in how different regions regulate these products is stark.
Let's look at the European Union. Under their EC 1223/2009 regulation, the EU operates like a strict bouncer at the door of a club.
That's a good analogy.
Right. They require a designated responsible person to be legally on file for every single product. This person is legally liable for ensuring the product complies with all safety norms. The company also has to maintain a comprehensive product information file containing safety reports, manufacturing methods, and proof of any effects the product claims to have.
The EU utilizes the precautionary principle, essentially. Prove to us that this chemical is safe before you are allowed to sell it to our citizens. In sharp contrast, the United States Food and Drug Administration operates under a vastly different philosophy.
Yeah, under current U.S. law, the FDA mostly watches from the sidelines. Cosmetic products and ingredients do not require FDA pre-market approval at all, with the sole exception of color additives.
Right. The U.S. system relies on post-market surveillance. The manufacturers are legally responsible for ensuring their own products are safe, but they don't have to prove it to the FDA before stocking the shelves.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the FDA only steps in to issue warning letters or request recalls after a product is already on the market and has been shown to cause harm or violate labeling laws.
It's a fundamental difference in philosophy. But this disparity creates a fascinating global domino effect, especially when we look at the ethics of safety evaluation, like the global shift on animal testing.
Animal testing is the perfect example of how interconnected this industry is. In 2002, the European Union agreed to phase in a near-total ban on the sale of any animal-tested cosmetics.
Wow, that early.
Yeah, and that ban took full effect across 2009 and 2013. That was a definitive legislative line in the sand for one of the largest consumer markets on Earth.
And it forced the rest of the world to respond. Take China, for example. Historically, China required mandatory animal testing on all cosmetic products sold there. But following the global shift sparked by the EU, China waived those requirements for domestically produced products in 2014. And by 2020, they lifted the laws making animal testing compulsory entirely.
We saw a similar legislative movement in Australia, too, which passed a bill banning the use of data derived from animal testing in the cosmetic industry, starting in mid-2020.
So a law passed in Brussels effectively changes the workflow in laboratories on the other side of the planet.
Exactly. When a major economic bloc like the EU enforces a standard multinational corporations, the handful of massive conglomerates like L'Oreal, Unilever, and Estée Lauder that dominate the global industry, they cannot afford to lose access to that market.
Right. It's just too much money to leave on the table.
Exactly. So rather than making two different versions of a lipstick, they often change their baseline formulations, their testing protocols, and their global supply chains worldwide just to comply with the strictest region's rules.
Which brings this entire massive, sprawling topic right back to you, the listener. Because it's easy to look at a tube of concealer and just see makeup. But the next time you step into the shower to wash your hair, or you apply your daily SPF, or you blend powder with a natural bristle kabuki brush, you aren't just getting ready for the day. You are actively participating in a millennia-old, multi-billion-dollar collision of chemistry, culture, and global law.
It is a daily routine built on centuries of trial and error. But it leaves us with a critical question to consider. We can easily look back at those 19th century aristocrats, painting their faces with lethal white lead and view them with a sense of historical superiority.
Right.
We think they were foolish for prioritizing a sociological status symbol over the clear toxicity of their daily routines.
Yeah, I mean, painting themselves with toxic house paint just to look wealthy?
But when we consider our current landscape, the lack of pre-market approval in places like the U.S., the legally meaningless marketing terms like natural, and our widespread use of unregulated protein-warping nanoplastics strictly for the sake of a smoother lotion,
It's kind of sobering.
it forces a bit of humility. What invisible ingredient sitting quietly in our bathroom cabinets right now will the history books of the 22nd century look back on with absolute horror? Think about the last time you were walking down a city sidewalk. You probably saw, like, a pigeon pecking at some random debris near a storm drain, stepped around it, and just completely ignored it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they just blend right into the urban concrete. Most people consider them this mild nuisance, just a byproduct of city living that basically only occupies your peripheral vision.
Right. But imagine walking past a broken piece of a billion-dollar communication satellite lying in the gutter and just kicking it aside. Because when you look at a pigeon, you are actually looking at one of the most sophisticated, world-changing pieces of telecommunications technology in human history.
It really is. It's a biological machine, one that functioned as humanity's paramount high-speed data network for literally thousands of years. I mean, they shaped the borders of early empires and practically drove the first modern financial markets.
Okay, let's unpack this. For today's deep dive, we are pulling from the Wikipedia archives on the homing pigeon, and our mission today is to completely shatter that whole urban nuisance perception.
Yeah, we really need to reframe how we look at them.
Exactly. We're exploring how this single ancient bird species functioned as this invisible web that held early human civilization together. And, honestly, how its underlying biological mechanisms still rival modern silicon-based technology today.
Yeah, to really understand their historical utility, we have to look at the sheer physical specifications of the bird itself, Columbolivia domestica. Because humans bred these descendants of the wild rock doe for one highly specific, biologically hardwired trait.
Which is just this overwhelming drive to return to their nests, right?
And physically, they operate at an astonishing baseline. We are talking about an animal that maintains average flight speeds of 60 miles per hour over distances of 600 miles.
That's highway speed.
Exactly.
And with a tailwind, or, in the case of those top-tier racing lineages, they can hit top speeds of 100 miles per hour. And their maximum range stretches up to 1,100 miles in a single flight.
Which is just staggering when you think about it.
To put that in perspective for you, that is basically equivalent to flying from New York City all the way to Florida, driven solely by the psychological imperative to just go home.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to remember what communication looked like back then. Before the advent of the telegraph, the absolute maximum speed of human communication was strictly limited by the physical speed of a galloping horse or a sailing ship riding the trade wind.
Which was not fast.
Not at all. So the homing pigeon really represents the moment humanity first went wireless.
And the historical footprint of that wireless network is just massive. Our sources document a pigeon post being utilized in ancient Egypt as early as 1350 BCE.
Oh, yeah. And by the 1st century CE, you have Pliny the Elder writing extensively about their integration into Roman military logistics. They were carrying 10 dispatches all across the Mediterranean.
They were even the broadcast medium for announcing the winners of the ancient Olympic Games across the Greek city-states.
Right, but integrating them into an actual empire requires a really continuous, complex logistical chain.
Because you can't just release a bird from the capital and tell it to find some remote outpost.
Exactly. It only flies home. So by the year 1167, the Sultan Nur ad-Din established this heavily structured, functioning mail service between Baghdad and Syria.
They essentially built a network of organic relay stations.
Yeah, and maintaining that flow of information meant you had to constantly transport caged birds outward from the capital via caravans. That ensured local governors always possessed a direct, high-speed uplink back to the center of power.
And Genghis Khan utilized a remarkably similar avian relay network to hold his expanding conquests together across the Asian steppe.
Because information asymmetry is the foundation of empire building. The entity that receives data first controls the geopolitical landscape.
Which is a principle that translates perfectly to modern financial markets. Which brings us to Paul Reuter in 1860.
Oh, this is a great example.
Yeah, so Reuter identified a crucial gap in the early fragmented telegraph lines between Brussels and Aachen. Instead of relying on trains or couriers on horseback to carry financial data across that dead zone, he established a fleet of 45 pigeons.
Just flying news and stock prices back and forth.
Right. And that fleet provided him with an immediate monopoly on fresh financial information in Europe. It's basically the 1860 equivalent of high-frequency trading algorithms.
It really is.
I mean, today, Wall Street firms spend billions of dollars tunneling through mountains just to lay perfectly straight fiber optic cables, all to shave mere milliseconds off algorithmic data transfers. Reuters achieved the exact same structural market advantage by purchasing a flock of birds.
Birds capable of flying 60 miles an hour. He literally flew his data above the competition.
And New York City newspapers executed the exact same strategy with the Halifax Intercept.
Right, because Halifax, Nova Scotia was the closest North American port to Europe. So rather than waiting for transatlantic ships to travel down the coast and dock in New York Harbor, newspapers dispatched reporters to Halifax.
To literally intercept the news.
Exactly. They intercepted the incoming European vessels, extracted the international news, and attached the notes to homing pigeons. The birds bypassed the maritime journey entirely,
allowing the newspapers to publish the dispatches before the ships even arrived in the city. That velocity provided an incredible competitive edge.
It really did.
But when you adapt that biological speed for warfare, you hit a massive logistical wall. And here I actually want to push back on the romanticized concept we often hold of the messenger bird.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, we picture this noble animal taking a dispatch from a soldier and bravely flying out to deliver it to an ally in need. But in reality, the system is strictly one way. A pigeon only flies to its home roost. It's not delivering mail out of loyalty. We literally just weaponize an animal's desperate instinct to get back to its bed.
What's fascinating here is how ingenious humans were to adapt that innate behavior. Because, yeah, if an infantry unit needs to send a dispatch from the front lines back to headquarters, they first have to manually carry those caged pigeons from the headquarters out into the trenches.
Which sounds awful for the birds.
It was. We just attached a payload to its leg and released it into a chaotic environment.
Now, humans did develop a slight workaround by placing a pigeon's food at one location and their home roost at another. You can condition them to fly back and forth reliably, covering round trips up to 100 miles twice a day.
But fundamentally, the bird is just attempting to reach a location where it feels safe and fed.
Right. And during World War I and World War II, quote-unquote safe often meant flying through artillery barrages.
The military records from those conflicts really highlight how critical they were as tactical infrastructure. In World War I, a French pigeon named Cher Ami was actually awarded the Croix de Guerre,
which is one of the highest military honors.
Yeah, for successfully delivering 12 critical messages. And Cher Ami completed these flights despite sustaining severe combat injuries.
The British even established the Dickin Medal in World War II, serving as the animal equivalent of the Victoria Cross. 32 pigeons received that medal for gallantry.
Birds like Patty, G.I. Joe, and Mary of Exeter.
Even the Girl Guides in Britain in 1943 recognized their strategic importance. They were actively raising funds to support the pigeon service and utilizing them to communicate with their world chief guide.
And the sheer logistical audacity of Operation Market Garden perfectly illustrates their value. The Allies pair-dropped 82 pigeons into the Netherlands alongside the 1st Airborne Division signals.
Wait, they literally dropped birds out of airplanes?
Out of aircraft, yes, over occupied territory. And to deliver their intelligence, those birds had to navigate 240 miles across an active theater of war, cross the English Channel, and locate a specific wooden loft in London.
That is wild. But I mean, utilizing standard radios in that environment was a liability. Radio frequency transmissions could be intercepted or triangulated by German signal intelligence.
Exactly. A pigeon served as an untraceable, encrypted, organic data packet. The confidential pigeon service dropped hundreds of them into Northwest Europe simply to provide local resistance agents with a secure uplink.
And that biological reliability extended well beyond the military into literal life-or-death payloads for modern healthcare.
Oh, the hospital routes.
Yeah. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, hospitals in Plymouth and Devonport in England, as well as several hospitals in France, utilized daily pigeon routes. because pigeons can carry up to 75 grams of payload on their backs.
So administrators strapped unbreakable vials and laboratory blood specimens to them.
Exactly. They moved medical samples above congested city traffic every single morning. And the English hospital route only ceased operations in 1983 because one of the medical facilities permanently closed.
Not because the avian network failed.
Right. Which brings us to the mechanics of this entire phenomenon, because here's where it gets really interesting. How does a bird dropped out of a military aircraft in the Netherlands physically locate a specific rooftop box in London?
It is genuinely one of the most heavily debated topics in animal navigation. The scientific community generally refers to it as the map and compass model.
Okay, map and compass?
Yeah. The compass aspect is relatively straightforward. Researchers basically agree that birds use the position of the sun to orient themselves directionally.
So the sun acts as the compass, provided the cardinal directions.
Right.
But the map, how the bird determines its starting coordinates relative to its home roost, is the unsolved variable.
Very much unsolved. For decades, the dominant hypothesis was the iron beak theory. Scientists identified clusters of iron particles in the upper beak of pigeons, assuming these particles aligned to the Earth's magnetic north.
Like a literal compass needle in their face.
Basically, yeah. They thought it functioned as a physical compass interfacing directly with the bird's neural network. It presented this really elegant anatomical solution.
Until a comprehensive study in 2012 completely dismantled it.
Completely. Researchers discovered those iron-rich cells were not magnetosensitive neurons at all. They were simply macrophages.
Which are immune system cells.
Right, immune cells that just happened to sequester iron. They possessed absolutely no connection to the pigeon's navigational neural pathways.
That revelation forced the scientific community to pivot toward the trigeminal nerve and a light-mediated mechanism in the pigeon's eyes.
Yeah, avian vision relies on specific retinal proteins called cryptochromes.
And this is the quantum mechanics part, right?
It is. When photons of light hit these proteins, they create a radical pair, essentially two entangled electrons. The Earth's magnetic field actually alters the quantum spin of these electrons.
That is just wow.
I know, and that chemical change signals the optic nerve. So the pigeon is theoretically perceiving the Earth's magnetic field as a dynamic visual overlay on the landscape.
Processed through literal quantum mechanics in its own retina.
Yeah, but this raises an important question, because magnetoreception is only one layer of the map. In the 1970s, researchers like Floriano Papi and later Hans Wallraff proposed olfactory navigation.
A spatial smell map. They argue that pigeons learn the spatial distribution of atmospheric odors circulating around their home roost.
So when released hundreds of miles away, they actively sample the air to determine the gradient of those familiar atmospheric chemicals.
They're essentially sniffing their way down the chemical gradient toward home. And then there's the GPS tracking data, which reveals a heavy reliance on visual landmarks too.
Right. Homing pigeons will actively follow human-made road infrastructure.
Which is so funny to picture. They will fly down a highway, execute a hard 90-degree turn at a major intersection, and follow habitual human commuting routes.
They process and utilize the concrete infrastructure below them to supplement their map.
Okay, so think about this. It's like navigating a road trip by combining a compass, a smell-o-vision map, visually following the highway. But wait, that still struggles to explain navigation across entirely unfamiliar, featureless territory like open oceans.
Exactly.
Which is where geologist John Hagstrom comes in. His research suggests pigeons navigate using low-frequency infrasound, sound waves as low as 0.1 hertz.
These are the deep, continuous ambient vibrations of the planet itself. We're talking ocean waves crashing against distant continental shelves or massive wind currents pushing against mountain ranges.
And Hagstrom hypothesizes that pigeons use these pervasive environmental vibrations to mentally map the large-scale topography of the Earth.
The physiological hurdle there, though, is that a pigeon's inner ear is far too small to interpret a wave of that massive wavelength while sitting still.
Right. If their ears are too small to perceive a wave that long from a static position, they would have to physically move across the wave to measure it.
Which perfectly explains their release behavior. When a pigeon is first released from a cage, it rarely flies in a straight line immediately. It flies in a wide, sweeping circle.
To physically sample the massive infrasound wave at multiple spatial coordinates. That allows their neural network to piece together the full length of the wave and orient themselves to the continental landscape.
Yeah.
So they're like strapping a subwoofer to your head to feel the Earth vibrating.
Hagstrom's hypothesis perfectly accounts for that exact circular release behavior. And it forces us to consider how an animal's sensory perception entirely eclipses human capabilities. Top scientists still lack a unified consensus because the pigeons themselves refuse to use a standardized navigational system.
Charles Walcott's experiments at Cornell University proved they exhibit hyper-localized evolution. He released homing pigeons near a severe magnetic anomaly in the Earth's crust.
And birds from one specific loft were entirely disoriented by the anomaly. They just scattered.
But birds from a different loft, located just 1 mile down the road from the first, flew straight home, completely unaffected by the magnetic interference.
One family of pigeons evolved to rely heavily on the magnetic field, while their immediate neighbors defaulted to atmospheric odors and infrasound.
They possess a profound biological redundancy, utilizing whatever combination of navigational tools best suits their hyperlocal environment.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
So what does this all mean? You would naturally assume the launch of telecommunication satellites and the laying of transoceanic fiber optic cables would permanently retire that biological toolkit.
I think so, yeah.
Yet, their physical payload capacity has kept them surprisingly relevant. I mean, the world's first formal airmail stamps were actually issued for the Great Barrier Pigeongram service in New Zealand back in 1897.
And it went on much longer than that. Police in the Indian state of Odisha maintained an active, official pigeon messenger service for emergency communications following catastrophic natural disasters.
And that flock remained operational until 2002.
Retired only when the internet infrastructure finally stabilized in those remote regions.
The transition to the digital age sparked a fascinating bandwidth rivalry between the pigeon and the computer. Because pigeons carry physical payloads, they can carry high-density physical data storage.
Oh, the Winston experiment.
Yes. In 2009, an IT company in South Africa got so frustrated with the sluggish speeds of their local internet service provider, they initiated a data race.
They strapped a 4-gigabyte memory stick to an 11-month-old homing pigeon named Winston.
And released him to fly 50 miles across the country. Simultaneously, the IT staff began transferring the identical 4-gigabyte file over their ADSL broadband internet connection.
And Winston flew the 50 miles in 1 hour and 8 minutes.
Factoring in the time to retrieve the bird, detach the memory stick, and download the data onto the destination server, the total transfer took 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 57 seconds.
And in that exact same 2-hour window, the ADSL connection had only transferred 4% of the file.
It is incredible.
It really highlights a critical distinction in network architecture between speed and bandwidth. The internet offers unparalleled speed for small packets, but bandwidth, the sheer volume of data moved concurrently, can still be dominated by physical transport. Sometimes biology outpaces silicon.
The tech community actually acknowledges this dynamic in their own architecture, too. In 2001, an engineering group in Norway successfully tested RFC Oven 49, which is a functional, albeit humorous, Internet Protocol designated IP over avian carriers.
They successfully pinged a network by utilizing homing pigeons to physically carry the data packets.
And the protocol executed perfectly. But that same physical payload capacity facilitates illicit applications in the modern era, too.
Yeah, between 2009 and 2015, authorities in the Brazilian state of São Paulo intercepted numerous homing pigeons actively flying into heavily guarded prison complexes.
Because associates on the outside were strapping mobile phones, SIM cards, batteries, USB cords, and narcotics to the birds. A pigeon simply flies over the razor wire, evades the metal detectors, and lands in a specific cell window with pinpoint accuracy.
It is the exact same logistical model the English hospitals utilized to move biological samples in the 1970s, just seamlessly repurposed for the black market.
Because the underlying advantage remains the unyielding reliability of their biological programming. A pigeon's navigation system cannot be hacked, and its signal cannot be jammed. It simply executes its imperative to go home.
Exactly.
So the next time you walk down the street and see a gray pigeon pecking at a sidewalk, remember what you are actually observing. You are looking at the descendant of a highly evolved biological machine.
A creature that bridged ancient empires.
Yeah, one that provided early financial markets with their first high-frequency trading edge, served as an encrypted data packet during World War II, and literally beat broadband internet in a data transfer race.
They truly are living, breathing artifacts of our global communication infrastructure.
There was one final thought I want to leave you with, though. Something for you to mull over regarding our modern relationship with these networks. We spent this deep dive exploring their invisible maps, how they synthesize visual landmarks, quantum magnetic overlays, infrasound vibrations, and spatial atmospheric odors to navigate the globe.
But look at how rapidly humanity is altering that exact landscape today.
Exactly. We are terraforming the sensory environment at an unprecedented scale. We are building massive, sprawling wind farms that generate entirely new artificial frequencies of infrasound. We are erecting megacities that permanently alter the atmospheric odors of entire regions.
We're expanding concrete road grids and generating massive electromagnetic interference with high-voltage power lines.
Right. So if these birds rely on ancient invisible maps of sound, smell, and magnetism, we are inadvertently rewriting the topography of their world. As our modern technological footprint grows denser and more complex, it really leaves you wondering if we will eventually cause the greatest navigators in history to permanently lose their way home.